Oh, I'm not sure where it is.
Okay, we are live. Don't worry if we can't get that on, Sally, it's okay. But if you can, that's fine. Guys, we are live inside the Academy. I'm just seeing who is jumping on. So we're just doing a few technical things here before we kick off, and we'll see who's going to come on and join us live. Let me have a look. So I'm going to pop mine on, pop my record on. Okay, so I'm going to put my mic in as well. Sorry, guys, we're just a couple of technical things. There we go. We are on. Okay, so we are live inside Salon Jedi Academy, and we'll see who joins us. But we are joined today by Sally Learmouth, who is the Managing Director of Gloss Communications, which is a PR company. And I thought this would be a brilliant time to bring on Sally because during lockdown, there's a lot of potential of actually getting some PR. You have more time on your hands that you can get more seen. So hi, Sally. Welcome to our In the Salon With podcast.
Hello.
Nice to have you here. So Sally, just if you can introduce yourself to everybody and just, a little bit about your company, who you represent, and just a little sort of overview of how you got into your company, Gloss Communications, and what is it that your PR company specializes in, and just a little bit of a background would be great.
So I started my agency 15 years ago, and prior to that I was a journalist. And when I started out as a journalist, I didn't actually know that PR existed. I didn't know it was a job. And then when I started in journalism, I was being approached by these wonderful people with lots of useful information, and I just thought it was a really interesting side that, I hadn't appreciated was there. And I was actually the deputy editor on Salon Business magazine before I set up my own agency. So that's how I come to specialise in hair, really. But before that, as a journalist, I worked in entertainment, I worked in film, I worked in music, and then I worked in hair. So I had a bit of a kind of an all-round experience. And I found that when I came into PR, I was kind of more excited by seeing my client's name in print than I was my own, which I thought was, it's quite an interesting thing. I think within PR, you have that opportunity to come into people's businesses and work with them to really elevate that. So that's one of the things that I find really exciting about doing PR. So I do specialise primarily in hair, which was more a sort of, that was just because that was the last industry that I'd come out of, really. Yeah. But over the years, I've looked after people like Trevor Sorby, Errol Douglas, Jamie Stevens, Jack Howard, Corinne Jackson, lots and lots of people. And I also look after brands. So we have Authentic Beauty Concepts, and we have Hair Flare, who do curl formers. So they're the really fab tools that you can perm on. And we've also looked after, things like psychologists. I've looked after digestive brands. I've looked after Wanderlust, the yoga festival. So it's quite diverse. And the good thing about that is that it gives me an opportunity, or us as an agency, an opportunity to work across lots of different media. So as well as hair, we are in touch with, wellness, health, news, all of the other areas. So that's just really useful.
Okay, so if there's some people that are watching this just now, and I know that this was me in the past, was I didn't really know what PR was. I knew it was maybe getting into magazines or something like that, but I didn't really know how to go about it. And I possibly maybe thought as well that it was only for like the big salon brands and the chains and stuff like that. And I didn't really think that I could approach a PR company, for example. I thought it was just a case of, I tried to do some things myself and get in touch with the local paper and stuff like that. But, what would you say to that in the sense of, does a PR company represent any size of brand or company or startups, or what's your experience? What do you tend to find?
Well, definitely. I think as long as you've got a story to tell, which if you have a business, then you have a story to tell. Then, yeah, I do think it's a really important part of your structure, because essentially you need someone to distill your message and communicate that. So I think these days as well, it's not necessarily just press. Like, you also need someone who's writing things for your website, your newsletters. You need to make sure that all of your communications are, joined up. And also because, you're putting things out there that represent your brand. So if things are going out and they're misspelled or they're inaccurate, or, you've just not really got to grips with that side, I think that's when a PR can kind of really come into their own for maybe a smaller business. And I find that, so with PR, it works really well when the person who hires you is very much on board with what you do, and they know that it's a collaboration. It's not that they just hire you to do PR and then leave you to it. Like, we need the material from you guys to be able to do the best possible job.
Yeah. I can imagine. Yes, I know what you mean. It's like there is a responsibility there that I know that I have to send you. Well, I'm with you. I send you the content, and there has to be that collaboration. And I know sometimes it can be, oh, you're so busy and you're having to do, write the stuff and give you the stuff. But how else are you going to get into the magazines and the articles if you don't have your part to play as well? But you touched on something really interesting there, actually, which was it isn't just about getting in magazines either. Actually, PR companies do, like, you do awards writing as well, some social media management, as you said, newsletters. I mean, there's more, like you say, there's more to it. What is the full range of the stuff that people can expect from PR companies?
So it's always good to have a chat about what your expectations are, and a chat with the agency about what they do. You need to look at things like budget and whether they can do everything that you want doing within that budget. But it is a really wide kind of sphere of communications. So I think it's about, really chatting to them about what your needs are. And like you said as well, you then have to commit to that, because if you hire a PR agency and then they go out and they secure 3 features for you and you don't return any of that copy, then they're not really going to carry on pitching you to other journalists until they get that back, because there's going to be a level of concern about, have you got the time to do this? Have you prioritized this? And you talk a lot about prioritizing as well. And that is the thing that we see with really successful clients. They know that they have to prioritize that PR. So over the years, I've had clients who've grown quite quickly. And a lot of that is because when I call them, I know that they'll call me back, whether it's within the hour, 2 hours, but, always that day. And they're reliable. And I know that when I talk to journalists, I'll be able to get an answer by the end of that day. So, yeah, I think that's a really effective way of working.
I think it's interesting as well, like how a different way of seeing it, as I think you touched on this as well, and this is how I see it, is that it's an addition to my team. So rather than, like hiring somebody full time, as in, okay, I'm going to hire a full-time PR or a part-time PR, which I don't really know what I expect them to do, because I don't really know what a PR job is, if that makes sense. So outsourcing it is, and I can't train them, so because I don't really know. So outsourcing is actually something that I do a lot of. I outsource PR, but I outsource design, I outsource website design, I outsource a lot of things. I outsource marketing, even though I do a lot myself, I still outsource it. But it's a different way of looking at it. But all these people that I outsource, including PR, I see as part of my team, like an extension of my team. So if you hear me talking about my team, I'll be like, that you're on my team and other people are on my team, even though I outsource them. Is that quite common? Is that common to look at that? Or
I would say that that's common with the people who do it well, because the people who are really on board with it, they're the ones who do see you as part of their team, and everything is a collaboration. Like, sometimes with past experience, sometimes it can be a bit tricky if this, the person who retains you, the owner of the salon, is then not readily available to move things forward, and you might end up speaking to a receptionist who doesn't understand the point of what you do, or even who you are sometimes, and it can be really tricky to get the information that you need. Whereas with the more forward-thinking salon owners who do see you as part of the team, you'll get introduced to the rest of the salon team. People know who you are and what you do. We sometimes send people like a checklist that they might put on their staff room wall, which talks about what a great story is, what are you doing in Salon? Are you making sure you tell your PR about it? So yeah, I think like when we feel like part of the team, that's when we know we've got a really great relationship going on, and that's always the most beneficial for the client, without question.
And the other thing as well is local, industry, international. It can cover all areas, can't it? So
Yeah.
what do you think that people should focus on? Let's just say, for example, just now in lockdown, I know that the last lockdown, one of the decisions that I made was that, like, you know, when we all locked down, it was like this crazy uncertain time, and you were just like shutting down all your bills and shutting down everything and pulling everything back to see where you're at. But there was one thing that I did not switch off, and that was PR, because I could see the potential in it. Because the way my sort of brain thinks, I'm thinking, well, hold on a second, everyone else will be doing that, which means for those of us, if there's going to be fewer of us that are actually, you know, still hiring PR and pushing forward, then there's more exposure to be had during these times. So right now in lockdown again, what are some things that people can do now during this lockdown to actually be seen? It got a little bit noisy in the last lockdown in the end, where everybody's online and everybody's doing, you know,
Yeah.
like I find myself getting into really key magazines and the things that you got for me, etc. What's some tips? Because you're going to have people listening, some who, what I want to kind of get across is some people that are listening are like, well, you know, they don't have the budget for it right now. What are some things that they can be doing right now? And then you have others that actually are going to go, hold on a second, I actually see the potential in this. So what are some, to start with, what are some tips for those that are just that you can do some local stuff, etc., or even industry stuff that they're doing it themselves? What could they do in lockdown right now? Got any tips?
So I think for local, you're probably going to be looking more at business stories at the moment. So while you know, it might be that you want to talk about what a great bob you can cut at this moment, what people are looking for are stories about, you know, what have you done in terms of PPE? What are you doing with your staffing right now? What are people doing while they're off, while they're furloughed? Are you doing anything particular like training? Is there any team building things that are going on? How are you maintaining that, you know, relationship within your community? So it might be that you're also doing things with charities locally, or, you know, it's going to be things that are a little bit more out of the box, I would say, at the moment. So for example, the things that we had with you over lockdown, a lot of it was very business focused, and because hairdressing suddenly became such a huge talking point nationally, you know, we were getting pieces in the Guardian, the Times, the Metro, the Daily Mail, because everybody wanted to know what was going on with hair. So, you know, a lot of our time then was crafting stories that would get the pickup with them. That was, you know, what's happening now in salons, what's next, what can they expect? So that's what I would look to distill on a local level. In terms of industry press, I mean, yeah, absolutely, this is a great time to be talking to industry press. It feels like it's all changed every minute, doesn't it? Like, you know, when we're not sure what's going on from one day to the next. So a lot of this is about how, you know, are you being resilient? Are you thinking positive? Are you, you know, what are you doing to make sure that this is a positive time and not a time where you just think, oh God, my business is falling down around my ears. I don't know what I'm going to do next. And I think as well, it's funny, isn't it, this whole furlough situation, because there is a temptation to think maybe where you could just sit at home with box sets and, you know, do a bit of pottering around the house. But actually, this is a really key time to be able to work on your business in a way that I think for a lot of people, particularly if you work behind the chair, you don't ever get this chance to step back and have a good look at all of the areas of your business, do you? Whereas right now, that's definitely what people should be doing.
Yeah, and I often think as well, sometimes people miss opportunities because they are doing amazing things and they are doing great things, but they're not approaching anybody about it. So, you know, like for me, I would say if you're not going to hire someone, then do it yourself, you know, but someone has to be doing it just to, you know, if it's another side of marketing, it's another form of marketing, it's another form of awareness, being seen. It's positioning, you're positioning yourself because you're like, you know, as seen in this, you know, I can more officially say as seen in the Huffington Post or whatever it is, as seen in the Times or whatever. So it's all positioning as well. So it really is something that I didn't get into well, I did it myself. I didn't get into it for a while, but I was really nervous at first. So when I first called up, I'll tell you this little story. I first called up my local newspaper, and I was absolutely terrified. And all I was wanting to do was pitch an idea to them, and I had to speak to somebody. But, as most listening will know, my fear of public speaking, it was bad enough even just going on the phone. I don't know what I was scared of. I guess it would be rejection. I mean, what's the worst they can say is no. And I remember being so terrified, and I was just pitching an idea that I'd sat on for years. This is what I would say to people: if you're sitting on an idea, get it out there. I'd sat on this idea for years, and it was to do like a Face of Ego, like a modeling competition locally, and like the local people would vote for which model would win each week, all that kind of stuff. And I pitched this to them because they used to do beautiful baby competitions. It was that type of paper,
Yeah.
And they asked me in. I had to go in and have a meeting with them. Again, nervous, all that kind of stuff. But they went for it. And I got in our local paper for 14 weeks of free
That's
press.
brilliant.
Sometimes double page spreads. And that was just on my own, having an idea, but acting on it. And I do think that sometimes we sit on things, or we don't see the opportunity in things. So what's some kind of, like, as you're saying, the stories, but what else? I mean, we've been obviously any awards. There's a lot of people that are have done awards recently, getting into awards. Would they reach out to their local papers, or what other places could they reach out to tell them about the awards?
Yeah, definitely local papers. I would also think about, I think sometimes people forget you've got local TV, you've got local radio, and those are all really good opportunities as well to pitch to. What we tend to do is try and cultivate good relationships with local press by, for example, we might invite them in for a complimentary appointment, and we might try and look after their hair on an ongoing basis, with you in the salon. And that's a way of, you're doing their hair for free. But then they are also finding out about all of your news, and you build up that relationship so that when you do have a story, you know exactly who you're going to take it to. And you also get to know, because what's really interesting about local press is they all have sort of different interests. And with some local press, there's certain things they'll cover, and sometimes hairdressing isn't one of them. And a classic example that I've had of this is Jamie Stevens, who had a salon in Somerset. His local paper in Somerset just would not cover anything that he was doing. And, even things like he was on TV, he was on the X Factor. And I had this conversation with the editor there, and he was just like, well, we cover crime, we cover... And I was saying to him, but Jamie's on TV, and you're telling me that you'll only cover him if he steals a TV. Like, how is that good for the area? Like, it's just, I just don't understand that. And then about a year later, I got a call from them saying that they were having an issue with the local kids. They had quite low self-esteem, and they felt like they were in a kind of dead end area. And I just thought, gosh, I'm not surprised, given that all you want to do is pump out negative news. But then they wanted Jamie to come along and talk to them all. And so there's nuances with local press where some of them are really open to covering, positive stories about success and achievements. And some of them just aren't. So part of it is getting to know them, because you're right. I mean, essentially, when you start from scratch with a new area, it kind of is cold calling, which is obviously what you had to do. And one of the sort of beauty of having an agency, particularly with, when you're approaching hair press and everything else, is that we work with them day in, day out, and we all have good relationships. Yeah. So, for me to be able to go and pitch a client, then that magazine knows already that there's a good story there, because I wouldn't be going to them if I didn't have a proper story, and that I'll be able to give everything else that they need, like high-res images or speedy quotes or whatever it is that they require. So yeah, I completely get where you're coming from about the cold calling side of it. But equally, if you have a good story, don't be afraid to approach your local press and tell them. And you're right, all they can do is say no. But if you have got a good story, the chances are they will say yes. They need to fill those pages.
Yeah, and I think as well that, even if you get together a list of all your local papers, all your local press, and like you say, do something, reach out to them and do something to maybe build a bit of a a relationship with them, and maybe pitch a few ideas, whatever it is. I mean, through the lockdown, I'm thinking we've been in the local paper so much more than ever before, and I don't know if
Yeah.
I've often sent them stuff, and I just think, oh, they just, like you just said, it was like sometimes they did, but most of the times when it was, strangely enough, when it was coming from me, most of the time it was a no. Now, I don't know if that's just a coincidence, but when it seems to go to them from PR, I mean, we've been in for the makeup award you had us in for. I was in for pledging the £100,000, the Salon Jedi stuff.
Yeah.
I was in for
The book launch.
the book
Yeah.
launch, and I think there was one other thing, I'm sure, but
I think
there's
we've
a
had
lot
some awards in there as well. Some
more.
hair awards as well.
It seemed a lot in a short space of time that in my head in the past when I've tried to get in, even if it was more than once, it was a no. So do you think that having a representative like a PR company actually makes them like look at it more, or do they value it more, or is that just coincidence?
It might be coincidence. I think it is better to have an approach from an agency because they know that they can rely on you to get the info that they need, and it might be to do with the way we structure pitches as well. Because I wouldn't ever pitch anybody without having, either a rock solid press release or a very good, written pitch that's got all the information that I think they might need. And a lot of that comes from having a background in journalism, because I can see, when I chat to a client about a story, I can see if there's gaps straight away. Whereas I think sometimes they might not have seen those gaps, and they wouldn't know what additional info is kind of required to get that covered. Sometimes as well, people get the angle wrong. So they might think they've got a story, but actually it's a different part of it that should be the focus. And sometimes people don't lead with the right thing. So, I always say to the team, when you're crafting a pitch, like, don't waffle at the start, and make sure that you get all of your really good info in those first couple of lines, and then you can go with more of the blanket info lower down. But you have to get to what the nugget of your story is and get that in straight away. And it's the same on the phone. You need to hook them in that first sentence. Particularly if it's someone that you don't actually know, you have to tell them something really interesting that they'll want to cover. And part of that as well is looking at your paper before you pitch them. So have a really good read of the publication. Don't just Google your local paper and not know what they write about. And within that, obviously, there's lots of different sections and different journalists. So it's no good ringing a news journalist to pitch a hair story if they have a beauty section, and it would be more at home in there. So it's about really, I'm really anal about having such a good look at everything before I pitch. So actually pitching is the smallest part of it. Most of it is the research and the lead up to it. Am I going to the right person? Have I got the right angle? Have I got all the information? And that's when I go in with it.
Wow, that's interesting, actually, because now when I look back on my little experience when I phoned up and I was asking with the paper that I approached them with the right thing, because I did know that if I wouldn't have approached, if they didn't do it, nobody else would do it. I knew that they were the only paper to approach because they did already run things. They already loved that kind of thing where they ran. They used to do a thing called, I don't know, some kind of pet thing and then a baby thing. And I'm sure they did a model thing from many, many years ago. So I knew it was something that they were more likely than anyone else. If I'd gone to anyone else, I'd have just been wasting time. So that's a good point about the research. A couple other things that I want to catch up on as we're chatting here today, and I'm realizing, I know this anyway, but I'm realizing it even more, is the amount that you can get done for somebody when you hire a PR, because it all takes time, isn't it? And a lot of us owners are already wearing 6 hats. We're already wearing all the hats. So even, it was when you mentioned about sending the photographs, like when you're doing photographic work, and it's not always big photographic collections. There's lots of competitions out there that are just, take a picture on your phone, but then, you might miss the deadlines, or you just, the intention is there, but life gets in the way and you're so busy in the salon that you're like, oh, crikey, I forgot to do that. Or even just sending, what I used to struggle with was even just sending downloading the photographic collections, and then people would ask you for them, and sending it out to all the, and getting in the magazines, or trying to get in the magazines and find out who do you send it to and all that kind of stuff. it's all just really time consuming.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think globally we have a list of over 100 titles that we send collections to, and then in the UK, you have to really think about what you're doing, because you can't just blast your collection out to every single UK magazine, because we look at exclusive with people, like magazines don't want to all publish the same collection, and if you just blasted it out to everyone and 2 people publish it, or one person comes back and says they want an exclusive and you just think, oh, I've emailed it to 12 other people, that's when you can kind of get in a bit of a mess with that. And because we send out lots of collections, we've got a really kind of watertight system as to, who we pitch, how often, how we manage all of those collections. And it also gives us a really good chance of getting covers as well, because, we're talking to journalists all the time about what their deadlines are, and, when they're setting that cover out, or what they want to see in particular. Because for some magazines, like we've been talking to a magazine at the moment, and because of the pandemic, they wanted a model that was quite smiley, which a lot of people don't put in their collections. But you kind of need to know that, unless you've got that insider info, you don't really know what to send to them, do you?
Yeah.
And it is a really big job, and I mean, like, I couldn't come in and start cutting hair all of a sudden, or I couldn't cut hair on a couple of days while I did PR, and because you're in different places, isn't it? And with PR, it's kind of, that's what we're thinking about all the time, and we're devouring media, and we know who's gone where, and we know who writes about what, and that's what our passion is. So whereas for you, I think it's more, or for for salons generally, I think that's something that you allocate a bit of time to, but essentially if you have the budget, it's best to give it to someone to work. And I think as well, if you see it as something, because it's quite tricky to look at a monetary sort of return on PR, because it's a bit more subtle than that. So if you're someone who sort of thinks, oh, well, if I spend £1,000 a month on PR, I'll get £1,000 worth of clients that month, that's how that will work. But it's more nuanced than that, and it's kind of like having a receptionist, or it's just one of those roles that someone does. Like, you need someone to do it, and that's just part of what will elevate your salon.
Yeah, it's a different form of marketing. It's more awareness, really. It is more awareness and positioning. That doesn't mean that you don't get phone calls that we had. So, for example, when we were up for the makeup award and we were in the paper, you're always going to get people that phone up, and we did, saying, oh my goodness me, that we loved her looks, we'd like to book.
Yeah.
We had people, it was months ago, and we had people booking in advance for Halloween makeup, because it showed some of the Halloween makeup.
Yeah.
You get it, but you don't count it. Even me as a marketer, you don't count it so much as you're going along. It's not like direct response marketing where exactly, right, everybody who responds to this advert, I know that this is how much I've spent that on the marketing, and there's a direct response that's needed, and then I can track it. It's a different kind of thing, but I still think it's an important thing for positioning and awareness, and getting yourself out there, whether it's locally, whether it's internationally, whether it's whatever it is. You can really start, but particularly in your industry, you can really start to get seen. We'll see if anyone has any questions for Sally. Any PR questions, type them in. I do have a question that I've had already that I can ask you, Sally. This is from Claire, and she wanted to know about, if you do hire a PR, what's the time frame? Is there, like, could you hire a PR for a month, or do you hire per project, or is it a year or 3 months, and what difference does it make if you're only doing it for a little while or a long time? What's time frame wise? What's some information around that?
So you wouldn't really get very much done in a month, I wouldn't have said. Generally, it's like, you could do it on a project basis, but the way it's most successful is when it just rolls on and on, because I find the more your relationship builds, the more your PR knows to go off and secure things for you, and it kind of snowballs. So we always see that when we get started, we've got to get all our materials together. Have we got a good press release for you? It's like getting to know you and understanding everything about your business, so that we can then go forward and kind of be the voice of that. So, for example, Corinne Jackson has been my client for 15 years, so right from when I set up the agency. And Corinne, I just know inside out, and I know, in fact, I've got a lot of things already that when I secure features for her, I don't even have to go to her to get them, because I know what she's going to say, or I've already got enough of it on record to be able to jiggle it into something workable. But it means as well that you can grow relationships. So another good example of that is I looked after a lady who did gong baths. So that was when I was doing the Wanderlust Festival, and I pitched to ITV Lorraine because she was doing this festival in September, and they didn't want to cover her in September because that just wasn't part of their agenda. But because I speak to them, every month, it got to January and they said, well, we're doing wellness now. We'd like her to come in and do a sound bath for Lorraine and Peter Andre. And if that had been like a 1 month or a 2 month thing, then she'd have missed the boat on that. But because it's more of a rolling relationship, you're able to follow through with those kind of pieces. So it's always better if it can be ongoing. I'm not saying that's essential. Like if you wanted to do 3 or 6 months, then a PR would definitely be able to work on that with you. And that would be more a case of identifying what it is that you want to do, because that's the thing with PR as well. You do need to have a point to it. Like, what do you want to achieve from it? So it might be that you're launching a new service, for example. It might be you're the only person in your area with who does balayage, who's got a specific type of service, like a machine or something. So that's when it would be worth doing more of a project.
Or it could be that you have your own technique of the way you do something. You want to get it out there, you want to get that, or you might be launching like a product, like you say, or just, it could be a lot of things. And you probably find that some people will hire for that, like for a project, but then actually see how well it goes and then keep rolling it over kind of thing. There's that as well. Talking of TV then, so for those, there'll be some that might be listening that are thinking, how do you get onto TV actually? And then, as you mentioned, that Jamie's on the X Factor and he's been on so many TV things. Are you a part of that? Are you a part of getting people into TV? Or is that more that the TV people send out, for example, a brief of what they're looking for and then all the PRs put forward? Or how does it actually work?
It kind of varies. So there's some TV people that we are in regular contact with and we do secure things with. Some of them come through, like it might be that people have seen, TV producers have seen in, like they will Google to look for someone who's a specialist in, say, thinning hair or perming or those sorts of things, and then they can come to you that way. So that's more of an indirect, you haven't approached that company, but because that client is kind of well known for that specialism, they've organically found them, out there on the internet. Sometimes it comes through people's personal connections. I mean, Jamie had a lot of good connections in his own right anyway, and some of that came through winning British Men's Hairdresser of the Year, for example, because that's how Gok found him. But that also just goes to show how the awards and things do feed into it. One of the things that I wanted to say to you is I think PR is really different from when I first started. So 15 years ago, there weren't really, there wasn't the online outlets. So it was predominantly print. Obviously, there was no social media at all, and people had websites, but that wasn't such a big thing. Whereas now, obviously, so much is social, and you have to have a good website. I mean, who would come to your salon if they looked online and couldn't find a website for you? They just wouldn't. So what that has effectively created is your own access to an audience, which previously, you were reliant on a magazine or a newspaper or, TV or radio to tell your story. Whereas now you can go and tell your story direct to your consumer, client, whoever it is that you want to tell that story to. And that's another reason that it's kind of really important to get that right, because you don't necessarily have to use that filter of a journalist if you want to do it directly, but that means that you have to be really on the ball in terms of what you're putting out there. I see that. And also awards. Let's talk awards. So you've touched on that a little bit, and how people can Google, like you say, journalist TV, they can end up Googling. So awards are part of positioning as well. Now, any tips for people who, because you write awards, that's a service that you do as well, writing awards for
like the British Hairdressing Business Awards, things like that. Any tips if people are taking it on themselves? Well, a couple of things actually is you do it as a service. I don't know if you do it as in that they can come to you and have it as a one-off service. I'm not sure. You can let us know if you do, but also if they are doing it themselves, what tips would you give? By the way, that noise in the background, everybody is, of course, it's bonfire night, isn't it? So what a night to do it. If you're hearing the banging, that's what it is in the background.
So yeah, we do that as a service. It's actually easier when we write for existing clients because obviously we have a lot of material that we can draw from, and we already know a lot about what they do that's really fabulous and unique and really fits the bill. If you're doing it yourself, I would say leave yourself plenty of time, because although you might look at it and think, that's 5 questions, I'll rattle that off a couple of days before the deadline, you won't. And the best thing about doing the awards is that when you get started, I think it will make you look at your business in different ways. And then you'll suddenly think, I really want to pull that picture out from 6 months ago, or I really want, I want to get those stats and I want to show what I've done that's different, and I need to show how I've improved. And it's about kind of finding all of that evidence and that story. But that's the other great thing. I think what I enjoy most about the awards is that you're telling a story. So, you're pulling out all those really unique sort of strands of info about that client, and you want them to stand head and shoulders above all the rest of people that enter. And that's obviously what's really exciting when you do, you get through or you win. It's such an amazing accolade when you think how many people go forward for this, and you're the one who comes out, in the top 6 or number 1. It's just incredible. But it does take work, and you want to show yourself in the best light. So lots of time.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely been a victim of that in the past, where I throw some award, entries together.
Yeah.
And then it's a mad rush, and then you don't get through, or you don't win, or whatever it is, and then the next year you're like, I'm going to put so much time aside next year.
Yeah.
the promise that I always make myself, I'm going to put so much time aside next year. Just something that I want to touch on is, before we kind of wrap up, what I want to just touch on is, for me, what I want to really get across is that often, like I've mentioned this earlier, but I'm saying it again, is like people are doing amazing things, but they're not realizing how amazing they are, and they're not thinking that it's newsworthy. But it's almost like you can find the story as well. It's kind of, like, I know that we're doing a lot of mindfulness stuff, and we're getting a lot of, around that. What are you doing in your salon that's different? Are you, I mean, there's just so many things. So one of ours was, we're a very mindful salon. So that got a lot of PR because it was that little bit different. And it's, are you doing things around mental health? Are you doing wellness programs with your, it's very on trend at the moment. Are you doing any wellness programs with your team? Is there anything that you're doing different at all that makes you stand out from the rest? Or, because I just think sometimes that people are doing amazing things and they don't realize how amazing they are. One of them is because they're not digging deep enough into their business, like you say, and realizing, oh, wow, they're not looking at their numbers enough to go, oh my goodness me. Like, some people come to me and they say what % color they're doing, and I'm like, are you insane? That is like amazing. You like get that into awards, get that out there. And they just don't realize or how much they've grown it can be from the last year. I remember one of the awards that I won. But I'll tell you a couple, just for those listening, to give you a rough idea. So when I won Creative Head Business Thinker 2015, it was actually based upon we'd been closed down. It was a challenge. Like, the road outside, sorry, not us, but the road outside was like a building site. And the story was all around that, how the footfall stopped and the traffic couldn't get there. And a lot of it was the things that we put in place to make sure that we conquered that, and that we came over that challenge. So it can be things like that as well. So particularly in lockdown, if you're doing anything that you're overcoming a challenge, or you're thinking out of the box and selling things online or products or whatever it is, all these things are, potentially awards worthy, but potentially real newsworthy as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think a classic thing that we see with salons is that they're so busy being busy, they kind of forget to tell anybody what it is that they're doing. And that's why regular contact is really important. And we quite often say, just tell us everything and we'll decide if it's kind of newsworthy or not. The flip side of that is that you do also have to listen to your agency if they tell you that something isn't, going to work. I had a salon once who insisted that their biggest USP was that they delivered great customer service. And I was sort of saying to them, it's not exactly a hold the front page, is it? Like it's kind of a given. So it's great that you do that, but it's not a press story. Yes, but I think what you said as well, that's a real classic example of turning a negative into a positive, because the fact that you had that happen at your salon enabled you to have a really incredible story then that a lot of people wouldn't have been able to have something that interesting for their business awards. So it's the interesting, it's a story. That is what's interesting.
Yeah, and people love a story, and I know I've judged awards before in the past, and you do read every part of it. But if it's too, like, you have a certain amount of time that you have to do it. So I always say to people, really section it, bullet point it, that kind of thing, rather than just loads and loads and loads of text. You've got judges that are having to go through like a pile of entries that it needs to stand out. It's got to be punchy, but it's got to be well. What's the word that I'm looking for?
It's chunking. It's like you always say about chunking. It's about making it bite size and distill everything. So it's interesting
and a great headline. So guys, let me just check. Anyone got any questions for Sally or any comments on, have you done PR? In fact, let me tell you about one of our Jedis at the moment. So I'll see if anyone has any questions. I just have to tell you this because I think it's great. So one of our Jedis at the moment who is this has just all happened by accident. She's turned into this, she's been in everything. She was approached by, Visa, MasterCard. She's had the newspapers at her salon. She's had all these things, and it all started from an app. So it's a shopping app that she took on. So she was one of the early adopters. She was one of this Amanda. She was one of the early adopters of this app that went out, and it was like high street shopping, and you could book online during this app. And she was an early adopter, but because she was an early adopter, they were given extra support, and part of that was PR. And this thing just snowballed. That because she did well with it, because she sold a ton of products. She'd made up. This was during the last lockdown. She'd made up all these boxes of products, etc., and she sold a ton of them. So of course, this app, we're like, who is this person that sold all these things? And then she was approached by Visa, and then by someone else, and it just went on. I just thought this was just this wonderful story of how, and it snowballed. But it just shows that that was something that she was an early adopter of. And then every person that came and asked her for, she was like, yes, will you do an article for this? Yes. Will you be interviewed for that? Yes. She was in this paper, that paper. Then she was out doing local charities. She just went, and she just spent the time in lockdown really focusing on that kind of local PR. But it came by accident. I just thought it was such a wonderful story. And Lisa here is saying lockdown was perfect for awards. Yes, Lisa, one of her Jedis, is finalist for the British Hairdressing Business Awards for the first time for Salon of the Year too. Not sure if Lisa, I don't know if you do PR or do you have any questions around PR, Lisa? But Lisa's she's also a very green salon, very
nice.
She's been up for sustainable awards, etc. as well. Okay, guys. Well, I think there wasn't any more questions around there. I want to say thank you so much. And I just really wanted to say thank you for all you do for us, for the team, Sally, with our PR. Lisa saying that she does it all herself. So hopefully you got some tips there, Lisa, as well. Thank you so much for joining us, Sally. And and listen, if anybody wants to reach out to you, sorry, I forgot to ask, if they want to reach out to you, how can they contact you?
Email's probably best. So it's sally@glosscommunications.co.uk. I'm always on my email.
Okay, sally@glosscommunications.co.uk. Okay, we'll share that with the Jedis as well. So if anybody wants to reach out to Sally, even for advice or anything like that around the PR, then feel free to do so. Take care, guys, and we will speak soon.
Bye.
Bye bye.